Hey there, Nopenguin here. Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Is an expensive game. I don't think anyone's gonna argue it's not. For the most part, if you want the most optimal deck to win an event, you're gonna be shelling out the big bucks. Not that you can't win on a budget, it's just that paying more money gives you a better chance. And nowhere is that more obvious than in our staples. When you have cards like Forbidden Droplets going for nearly 100 apiece, Pot of Prosperity for even more, and even Ash Blossom, one of the most widely spread cards, going for as little as about $27. You know, the card that came in a structure deck. But worry not, my fellow Penguin enthusiasts, because there is hope. If we look past the Ash Blossoms, the Infibs, the Ghost Bells, there are still quite a bunch of Handtraps that are not only effective, but affordable. That's what I want to look into today. Today, we are looking at budget Handtraps, because nothing goes hand in hand more like a rogue player and their budget options. First off, we are going to start with Effect Veiler. Now, before we go any further, I just want to explain that the price you see here is grabbed right from the market price on TCG Player. Effect Veiler is one of the best Handtraps right now. It sees play at every level, because the effect to just negate a monster is so good, especially when there's so many insane monster effects out there. What's more, this card has been reprinted so many times that we can find this for as little as $1.47. I would say one of the main downsides with this card is, unlike Infinite Impermanence, you can't really start your own turn to fiend out a negate or some other thing like that. It only activates during your opponent's turn. But with that being its only really flaw, it's still an insanely good card and one that any budget player should have at least a playset of. On the same topic of effect negation, we have, I would think, an underrated pick, frankly. Ghost Mourner and Moonlight Chill. I'm seeing a lot of decks playing Veiler and Infib, but if you can't afford Infib, I feel like this is a decent enough option. It's got a couple things holding it back. Firstly, it can only activate to a special summon of an opponent's monster. So if your opponent normal summons a Luber, you would not be able to Ghost Mourner it. However, it also inflicts damage to your opponent if that monster leaves the field. It's definitely not as versatile or good as Infib or Veiler, but if you just want a little bit more Handtrap effect negation, I think this is a good enough option. And at $2.02, it's affordable as well. To round off our budget effect negation trio, I figured I should at least mention Heavenly Zephyr Miradora. Now, when this card was first announced, I remember some people thinking it was going to be amazing, but it turned out it just wasn't. The good parts about it is the activation of it cannot be negated, and when your opponent special summons a monster from the extra deck with 2000 or more attack, you could special summon this monster. Then when special summoned, you could target that monster that was special summoned from the extra deck. Its effects cannot be activated while Miradora is on the field. Now, on first reading, this card seems insane. Why is no one playing this? Well, when you read it again, the issues start to really show themselves. Now, its summon effect is not like a Fleur de Lis where the resolution negates the effect. It activates in a new chain. So if your opponent, for example, summons an Albion and activates its effect, you will then chain Miradora, special summon it, but by the time you're able to activate Miradora's effect to stop it from activating its effects, it's already activated its on-summon effect. This is only good against extra deck monsters who don't have a great on-summon effect, but an ignition effect that they can activate after it is summoned. And even for something like Access Code, you can't even respond to the summon of it with Miradora. Though I will say, there will come a deck that has exactly the right amount of things for Heavenly Zephyr to be a house. At $2.41, I say it's worth picking up a playset while you can. Artifact Lancea. This card fucks. Against the right matchup, you literally just win the game if you open Lancea. There's not a lot of Handtraps that can boast game-ending potential off of one activation. This is one that you'll want to have in your side deck at all times, and being only $1.42, it's a no-brainer to pick it up. Next, we have DD Crow. Now, DD Crow is a really interesting card. If played well, this can be an absolutely devastating thing for your opponent, getting rid of that last resource they need to make the final push, completely just stopping their combos midway, or maybe just to get rid of that DB that's annoying you. Of all the Handtraps, I think DD Crow is the most polarizing of them, because this can be really good in the right hands, or you literally discard one card to do nothing. This isn't just respond to effect negate, this takes a little bit more thinking. And if you want to get yourself a playset of DD Crows, each of them only costs $2.73. Ghost, Ogre, and Snow Rabbit. This card is great. This card is actually amazing. Like a lot of hand traps, it definitely matters what cards you're going to be coming up against, but with the adventure engine still completely untouched in our current format, Ghost Ogre is still going to see a whole lot of play. At first, it doesn't seem that good because it can't negate the effect, but the fact that it actually removes a monster off the field can be the deciding factor between your opponent continuing their combo or ending their turn. This is actually one of the cheapest options we have here on the list. It was just reprinted in the latest structure, so you should have no problem finding yourself a playset. Sideframe Gear Gamma. This one just barely made it under my $5 threshold, but I'm glad it did. Sideframe Gear Gamma fits a really strange niche in hand traps, as it's not only used to stop your opponent's plays, it's also useful for facilitating your own plays. For example, if you activate Magical Meltdown to add Alistair, they'll ash you, you can then chain Gamma because you still don't have a monster on the field, protect your search effect, and be able to go off with those two materials. The obvious downside is you need to play a Garnet. And then if that Garnet gets banished off of its effect, the second and third copy of Gamma aren't as good, but overall Gamma is an insanely great card. Contact C. Now, there are several of these C hand traps, but the only one that we're going to talk about today is Contact C, as the other two really don't do anything in this format, if I'm being honest. Contact C is good against exactly branded Despia. Because they play nothing but fusion monsters, if you can get this onto their field and force them to use this as one of their materials, they really only have one option, which is going for Chimera, which is not the greatest going first. Of course, the usage of this card is almost exactly on branded Despia, as pretty much every other deck has some way to get a generic Link monster out. The only other deck I can think of off the top of my head would be DDDs. DDDs would have a hard time dealing with Contact C. And at $1.03, it is very cheap, but not the cheapest one we're going to see today. Now, Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries is a card I am shocked has not seen more play over the last couple formats. When every deck has been jamming DPE, being able to just reveal your own DPE and have your opponent get rid of theirs for the rest of that game, I seriously don't see why this wasn't played more. Of course, DPE is not budget, that's not what we're talking about right now. The card itself is only $1. And there are even budget options for meta decks. For example, if you don't want to deal with that Mirror Jade is also just about $1. The problem is you do have to use some of your extra deck space to have those targets, and your opponent already has to have a monster on field. But in the case of Mirror Jade, they're not going to be able to get that out first thing. I think Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries is an insanely underrated card, and it's one I want to see more playing. And for the cheapest hand trap of the day, we have Skullmeister, racking it in at 65 cents. Now, Skullmeister has a pretty good effect. When an effect is activated in your opponent's graveyard, you can send this card to the graveyard, negate it. That being said, the more you think about when you're going to use this card, the more you realize why no one's really using it. Because most time graveyard effects go off, it's because you've summoned something with that as material. So if your opponent simply chainlink one graveyard effect chainlink to the monster they're summoned, you can't Skullmeister that. It has to be the last card in the chain. Skullmeister is a very interesting card. In a way, it's actually just worse DD Crow, but a future deck could come out that makes it so Skullmeister is the perfect hand trap against it, and at 65 cents a pop, why not grab a playset? There's actually one more card I want to talk about, and that's Gnomaterial. Now, this card was actually a TCG exclusive, so when it was first revealed, people thought this would be an amazing card. And on paper, it actually is. If your opponent special summons a monster, you can discard this card, target one of their face-up monsters they control, and this turn, that card can be attributed or used as material for a fusion, synchro, exceeds, or link summon. If you hit this at the right time against combo decks, they literally just have to end their turn. And when this video was first thought of, I was going to talk about how this would be really good against prank kids specifically. By targeting the Meow Meow and stopping them from using that as link material or fusion material, you could really do a number on that deck. But Konami fixed that problem for us. I think Gnomaterial has a lot of potential, and getting yourself some Gnomaterial will only cost you $1.87 a pop. But that's all I wanted to talk about today. Now, expectedly, we didn't find any gems that will completely change how Yu-Gi-Oh is played forever. The Yu-Gi-Oh community does a good job at knowing what cards are super playable and what cards are sort of mid. And they'll often go for very general effects like just negating the effect, as opposed to more specific things like Gnomaterial or Contact C. But if you are a budget player, I hope that this gave you an idea of what kind of cards you have at your disposal. Now, these obviously aren't all of the budget hand traps, but I would say these are all the ones you would actually play. And with that, if you liked the video, give it a like. If you want to see more, please subscribe. This coming weekend, I'm actually going to be trying to get my top with DDDs. No, not at that event. This is Nopenguin, Jank Enthusiast and Budget Crusader, signing out.